Hi everyone, I'm Laurie Mulvey. I'm a director of World in Conversation, which is a center for citizen diplomacy at Penn State University. I'm here with my collaborator and husband, Sam Richards. He's going to be asking questions to me and I'm going to be responding for our session. I'm really honored to be a part of this and so sad that I can't be with you in person. Hopefully this will be a small offering to what you all are doing here this week.
So, Laurie, tell us what you do.
So what I do is train student facilitators, conflict facilitators, to be able to work in small groups with people in conflict in order to modify that conflict and get them to actually think together to solve problems together. So I really care about people being able to solve problems with their opponents, because what I've observed is that we don't build the world with just our allies, we need to build it with our opponents. And so that's what we're training students at World in Conversation to do.
And tell us about World in Conversation, the center itself.
So World in Conversation has been part of Penn State for the past 20 years. Sam and I are actually the co-founders, and it is, we do 25 dialogues a day, so our student facilitators are leading dialogues with both Penn State students and students at universities internationally. For example, Iraq, Russia, Colombia, Korea soon. And this is their training ground, but it's also a place where we offer dialogue experiences to our communities.
So what is necessary to be a global citizen?
Global citizenship. Actually, what I see is that the type of training that facilitators need actually requires the mindset that I think is the same as global citizenship. And so what do I mean by that is an ability to engage people across borders of any kind. They can be intra-cultural borders, the different groups that we have within a nation or within a culture, or across national borders or issue borders, but really being able to engage, not just think about what a different perspective is or what other groups might want or need, but actually to engage those others in a way that ultimately, I will say, transforms oneself. And I think that one of the things that happens with all people, but young people especially right now, is that they're introduced via our technologies to a lot of perspectives and a lot of people who they come to engage with and enjoy and respect, but they really don't have the experience of actually engaging across cultures in ways that impact them and shape them. And so they have a lot of ideas, but not a lot of practical experience. And that practical experience is the difference between day and night.
And so it requires a mindset. Can you
Mindset,
say more about that?
Yeah, it's funny that what we need is to actually engage other people, and what that does is not just develop ways of engagement. It does that, but it also, more importantly, develops a mindset that, for example, you understand how to enter another culture. I've traveled with students from the United States, from various cultures to other places, and the one thing that I notice is when people are in their own culture, they have ways of understanding how they're different from one another and who is centered in the culture and who is not. And then those very same people I've watched enter another nation and expect the world to operate as it does in their homeland. And I think, that's because you have ideas about culture, but you don't have experiences of yourself responding to the differences that you encounter when you actually are in another culture. And so that conversational interaction between a person and another worldview is what is necessary to be able to navigate as a global citizen, as somebody who understands that when we cross a border of any kind, again, it can be an ideological one or a real border, there is something different and we are required to do different things and to observe, understand, and interact in different ways when that happens. And if you don't have the experience that challenges you, it's just a set of thoughts and a set of ideologies that actually becomes toxic ultimately. Because people think they know better, and they think they are global citizens. And I would suggest that it's rare for people to cross borders. And there are many people who do this, but it's not typical.
So to be clear, you have traveled all over the world working with young people. So you have experiences with people from many, many different cultures and backgrounds. And do you notice any differences in abilities to engage or to develop this global mindset?
I want to say I don't notice profound differences. I think being from the United States and watching young people from other countries and cultures relate to people in the United States would suggest to many people that there is a difference, because it seems, and it is true, that people from other parts of the world know more, so they think, but truly they know some more about the United States or Americans than Americans tend to know about them from whatever country or culture that they're in. And so it looks like there's a difference in how people come together from different parts of the world in terms of their ability to be global citizens. But what I find as soon as I enter deeper into the culture of whatever nation, it is very similar. That people tend to not know about one another in a deeper way, and even what they understand about a country like the United States is extremely limited, stereotypical, in fact.
So you use the United States because so many people have experienced the United States via media, and so have some sense that they understand.
Absolutely. I mean, people have consumed US media for a very long time. So there are a lot of understandings about politics and pop culture and music, et cetera, that have come to other places more than those places have come and impacted the United States. Although I think we see Korea might be a major revolution in that, which would be nice to see. But anyway, that initial imbalance in that we understand some things about your culture and have a way to interact with you Americans, with that in mind, is present, of course. And the fact that many people are learning English or know something about English, again, makes it look like it's different. But when we get deeper into real issues, I don't see a lot of difference in terms of people's ability to truly engage across cultures.
Okay, so let's stick with Korea for a second. So there is a lot of we're watching the Korean culture just move out around the world, and growing numbers of people all over the world are finding themselves very curious about Korean culture. This is the Korean wave, right? So curiosity is one thing, and so you want people to have a curiosity, but you need something else, right? And that's the something else is what your work is.
Well, I think, yes, I do think curiosity is key to global citizenship, really authentic curiosity. And I think but what is the point of citizenship is to be accountable and responsible for acting, I think, in service of the greater community, right? So we think of citizenship of a nation. Citizenship, it's participation in the work of the nation, i.e. the larger community and collective. But I think, and so similarly, in the global realm, it's about participation in the global culture, if you will. And I think if we're just thinking about, we're just curious what kind of music or just what kind of films, that's a great place to start. I'm not minimizing that, because starting is better than not starting, for sure. But we need global citizens who actually want to engage in much more profound ways to make alliances, to solve some of our global problems. Just in the way that within our local communities, I would say citizenship would be about reaching across the borders, not to just think like, oh, I thought that person was my enemy, but now I see they're like me and they care, they're decent people. That's the beginning. Citizenship is taking responsibility to work together for the collective.
Okay, so let's talk about your specific work in training students, the actual training process. So what do you do along those lines?
Well, the main overall intention of the training process of facilitators is in the dimensions of mindset and skills. And so communication skills are one piece. What do you actually do when you're interacting with other people in order to invite them into areas that are controversial in ways that allow us to build together instead of break down and go our separate ways. And so communication is a technology when you study it. And so we spend half of our time helping students to understand how to ask questions, how to listen, how to engage people that look like they don't want to be engaged, how to disrupt a pattern that's happening that is actually not functional to a group. So those are all the skills. Mindset is, as I said earlier, just a profound element of this where, and the key part of it for a facilitator is the ability to take all sides in a conversation in a small group. And so a facilitator will have to interact and intervene in a group on behalf of people of this perspective or people with this ideology or that ideology, and a facilitator has to be convinced, and this is the mindset development, that this is necessary for the well-being of a conversation, to be able on any level to turn conflict into collaboration.
So one thing that I know that you train students to ask questions. And ask really good questions. You ask these facilitators to ask questions. So when people are in a group, you want them to be able to have a very interesting conversation with one another, and it starts with a good question. So can you say something about that?
Well, actually, asking good questions is a little bit overstated sometimes, because students, this is what happens when they're beginning to learn. We teach them how to ask questions that will open up the conversation instead of close the conversation. So we ask them to learn how to use open-ended questions. And so sometimes they wind up getting so focused on how do I ask the question that they fail to understand why they're doing it. Why questions are important is because when people are in conflict, especially deep, intractable conflicts with high stakes, they have a lot of answers. They actually have no questions because it's very clear to people on each side what the answer is. This is the right answer. This is the right answer. This is the way to do it. This is not the way to do it. And so the intention of a facilitator is to break that cycle of my answer versus your answer and ask a question that can destabilize those very clear answers, because life isn't really made of very clear answers, in order to open up the field for people to engage in a way that they haven't before, because they're no longer so clear about their answer.
Okay, so let's talk specifically about you're here in Korea, and you are working with Konkuk University in Seoul to bring students here in Korea into conversation, not only with students in the United States, but also the possibility of students in other parts of the world, because you are working with students at universities all over the world. So tell me, what would be the goal of this conversation between, say, 5 American students and 5 Korean students? Because conflict is not the key. So what would it be? What's the goal? Because there's no conflict between them. Unlike when you have conversations between...
I love this question. I want to jump into it. Really, what we wind up doing in these cross-national dialogues is coming up, or is addressing issues, examining an issue that may be controversial for any culture. And what we find and what the goal is for people from multiple cultures and therefore perspectives and ideologies to examine an issue together. And so what we find out is that maybe we're talking about immigration, right? And so there's a narrative in a culture like the United States about immigration, and there's so you might say warring groups about that. And then when you bring in another national conversation into that, both groups are able to open up the conversation for each of those national conversations, because this happens so much when we talk about policing. So in the United States, there's a very clear argument right now about abolishing the police or we need the police, right? And so when we have people coming in from Iraq and Russia and Colombia and talking about the police, they bring in very different questions to the American students who are so clear about this. I use this, I'm saying American students right now because this is a real issue in the United States, but it's when you bring people in with different experiences and national policies, everybody gets to question what's true.
Or the issue of how we adapted to the virus in the United States versus how Koreans adapted to the virus. Absolutely. And the willingness to follow a government. Mm-hmm. Or you had a conversation with some students the other day here about spending money and tax money on refugees or people coming from North Korea. Mm-hmm. And you were saying like, well, this is very similar to people coming from the South, from Mexico into the United States. And so the conversations are very similar in those ways.
Absolutely. We also had a conversation in Bogota, Colombia at one point about safety and security. And our colleagues in Colombia in this conversation were talking about how dangerous it is in Colombia. And as they were giving us examples of how dangerous it is, from an American perspective, I was expecting to hear something much more dangerous. And from their perspective, it was interesting to hear that as people coming from outside of their national conversation, we were thinking that what they were saying really didn't sound that different from our experience. And so it doesn't matter in what I'm saying right now, which is true. We're not picking which is true. But when we have perspectives in conversation with one another, everybody gets smarter, because you're no longer just in your narrow view of the world. And so that is the goal of bringing people together at this simple level cross-nationally, is to get better at, or have the opportunity to think together at these issues that we feel are so local to us.
So it will be interesting to have the Korean voice in these questions about danger and crime, because Absolutely. It's very different here. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hey, so we have a couple minutes left. Can you say something about speaking of dangers, the dangers of not paying close attention to educating for global citizenship? Because this is a conference on the humanities, right? So could you say something about that? If we don't do this, what are the dangers? I'm
going to say that in the field that I stand in, which is so much about communication, so I spend my time educating people to communicate, and it's a realm where people think they already know how to talk and listen and, persuade people of things, et cetera, et cetera. And when you actually enter into this field, you realize that communication is a technology that actually one can become masterful in and can become expert in, and there are many strategies and ways of operating in that field. And so it is so crucial to teach students, young people, all of us, about these humanities, and I'm using communication as one, because we assume that we know things that actually would build our well-being as communities and people if we invested in learning more about them.
Final comment. When you look to the future and you see all this technology that we have, and it's very much developing very quickly here in Korea, what do you see?
I see the need to catch up with our electronic technologies and digital technologies. In other words, I see that the human mind and spirit even needs to recognize that we have people around, there are technologists that are not building applications for us, but others who actually could support the work of the future by collaborating and helping us to understand that that our way of communicating is profound and can be supported with expertise that we don't have in most of our education systems. And I think the technology is showing us the toxicity of the technology outcomes in many cases is showing us how much we need to learn about human relationships, conflict, and the technology of communication.
Okay. All right, thank you.